What if everything you thought you knew about Genesis 1 and 2 was wrong? Not a little wrong, but breathtakingly, soul-shakingly different. What if the story you've read since childhood was never truly about the beginning of the material universe at all, but about something infinitely more sacred, more intimate, more dangerous to the way you see the world? Imagine holding a treasure map for years, convinced it led to gold, only to discover it leads to the fountain of life itself, a place where heaven and earth meet, where the breath of God still lingers in the air, and where every heartbeat becomes a step deeper into His presence. This is not just history. This is the unveiling of the cosmic temple, the dwelling place of the Almighty, the holy blueprint hidden in plain sight since the dawn of creation. For centuries, translators, traditions, and modern minds have painted this as the origin of matter. But the ancient Hebrew whispers another story, one that begins not with a cold explosion of particles, but with the warm light of God filling His temple, preparing it for the arrival of His priests, humanity. And here is where it will shake you. If you miss this, you will keep reading Genesis through 21st century eyes instead of through the eyes of ancient Israel, and the heartbeat of the passage will remain veiled. In this journey, you will see why the very language of Genesis mirrors temple dedication, why the number 7 is the holy seal of completion, why heaven and earth are layered like sacred courts, and why your life, yes, your life, is part of this living sanctuary. So I ask you, have we been taught to see only the walls of this story, while missing the door that opens into the presence of God? And if this truth has been hidden for thousands of years, who hid it? And why? Stay with me, because in this video we are going to step inside the ancient world, hear Genesis as its first hearers did, and uncover the glory that has been waiting for you since the beginning. Not of the world, but of God's dwelling among us. Tell me in the comments if this already stirs something in your spirit, and let your heart lean in, because every word from here could change the way you worship, the way you live, and the way you see creation itself. And if you are ready for the truth to set your heart on fire, make sure you follow, share, and keep this message alive, for we are about to return to the very threshold of Eden. The common misreading, how modern minds distort ancient words. We have been told for generations, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, as if those first words of Genesis were the spark that ignited matter into existence, the moment galaxies spun into place and atoms began to dance. But when you lean closer, when you listen to the cadence of the Hebrew tongue, the opening is not a sterile timestamp, but a living doorway. In the beginning of God creating, a phrase pregnant with movement, purpose, and presence. The difference is not small. It shifts the center of gravity from the birth of matter to the enthronement of God. Our modern eyes, trained by science and timelines, rush to treat Genesis like a laboratory report or a cosmic diary, measuring the divine with stopwatches and telescopes. But the ancients heard something far richer, a song of God preparing His dwelling, not a cold account of physical origins. Imagine walking into a cathedral and being so fixated on the bricks and mortar that you miss the stained glass ablaze with sunlight, the air thick with incense, the echo of voices lifted in worship. That is what happens when we force Genesis into our 21st century frame. We trade the glory for a schematic. And the tragedy? We think we have understood God's word, when in truth we have flattened it into something it never claimed to be. The Spirit did not inspire these words to satisfy curiosity about the mechanics of the cosmos, but to reveal the heart of the one who orders it for His dwelling. To hear it as the ancients did is to be invited into the temple, not the textbook. This is why we must strip away the modern dust and see the text as it truly is, a living declaration of God's intention to dwell among His creation. And if this feels unsettling, good. It means the door of revelation is opening wider, leading us to the next step. Seeing through ancient eyes. The cultural lens. We forgot. When you hear the words of Scripture without the ears of its first hearers, you risk holding the form while losing the fire. The ancient Israelites did not read Genesis with debates about evolution, geology, or the Big Bang. They heard it as a cosmic coronation hymn, a temple dedication liturgy, a declaration that their God, not the gods of Egypt, not the pantheon of Babylon, was the sovereign king enthroned over all creation. Imagine the difference between reading a love letter written in your native tongue and reading it in a machine translation. You might grasp the outline, but the poetry, the intimacy, the subtle turns of meaning vanish. In the days of Rome, when Jesus said, "If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2, his audience knew instantly the weight of those words, because Roman law allowed soldiers to compel civilians to carry burdens for exactly 1 mile. To go 2 was a shocking act of defiant generosity. Without the cultural lens, the sentence becomes a mere moral platitude. With it, it becomes a revolution of the heart. Likewise, when Israel's first audience heard the Genesis account, they recognized the patterns, the cadence, the symbols. To them, the division of light and darkness, the establishment of boundaries, the blessing of rest, all were the liturgical steps of preparing God's sacred dwelling. We read it as if it were addressed directly to us, forgetting that it was written for us, but not to us. The danger is subtle. When we impose our context on their text, we distort the meaning until it reflects our concerns rather than God's original revelation. This is why humility is essential. We must kneel at the threshold of the ancient world, asking to see as they saw, to feel the awe they felt. And once our vision shifts, the story begins to unfold with a beauty and power we never knew were there, leading us deeper toward the truth of God's dwelling. The cosmic temple, God's dwelling, not just a world. In the ancient world, temples were not merely places of worship, they were microcosms of the universe. The structure itself was a model of creation, and creation itself was a temple on a cosmic scale. The Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Canaanites all built sanctuaries as earthly reflections of the heavens. Inside these temples, every wall, every column, every pool of water carried symbolic meaning, the pillars representing the mountains of the earth, the ceiling painted with constellations, the inner chamber symbolizing the dwelling of the deity. And into this world, the God of Israel spoke through Genesis, not describing the assembly of matter from nothing, but declaring that all creation is his temple, the place where he would rest and reign. The Kesh Temple hymn, one of the oldest pieces of literature we possess, describes the building of a temple as the center of the universe, the heart of the world where divine and human meet. The Israelites would have recognized in Genesis a similar proclamation. Heaven and earth are not random accidents, but a carefully ordered sanctuary, and humanity's role within it is not to exploit, but to serve as priests, those who tend, protect, and represent God's rule to creation. This changes everything. If the world is a temple, then every mountain is an altar, every river a reflection of his glory, every breath a gift of the one who dwells among us. Yet how easily we fall into the modern trap of separating the act of creation from the intention of habitation, treating God as a distant architect instead of the present Lord of the house. The seventh day, the Sabbath, is not an afterthought. It is the climax, the moment when the king takes his throne in his temple. And once you see this, the threads begin to weave together, the purpose of creation, the role of humanity, the meaning of rest. It is not about an ancient debate over hours and days. It is about the eternal truth that God's desire has always been to dwell with his people in a world ordered as his holy sanctuary. And from here, the scriptures themselves will confirm this vision. lifting the veil on the temple language that runs from Genesis to Revelation. Scripture's confirmation, the Bible's own temple language. When the prophet Isaiah records the voice of the Lord declaring, "Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool, where is the house you will build for me?" The words do more than echo through time. They anchor us in the reality that creation itself is God's sanctuary. The question is not whether he has a place to dwell. The heavens and earth already resound as his dwelling place. This truth surges again in the poetry of Psalm 104, where the psalmist describes God wrapping himself in light as a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent, laying the beams of his chambers on the waters. The imagery is not architectural in the earthly sense. It is cosmic, majestic, and deeply personal. Revelation 21:22 seals the vision, showing a renewed heaven and earth as the ultimate temple where God himself is the light and his people dwell in his immediate presence. The river of life flows from his throne, trees of healing line its banks, and the curse is no more. These are not scattered verses. They are threads in a single tapestry, woven from Genesis to the final Amen. In the tabernacle, in Solomon's temple, in the visions of Ezekiel, the same language appears: boundaries of holy space, the central presence of God, the rhythm of rest. The biblical authors were not merely borrowing cultural metaphors, they were revealing an unbroken truth. Creation is the temple of the living God, and every other sanctuary is but a shadow of this eternal reality. When we understand this, our worship changes. The Sabbath becomes more than a pause. It becomes participation in God's reign. Our world is no longer a stage for human ambition, but a holy place where every action, every word, every breath becomes worship. And from this understanding flows the deeper symbolism that God himself embedded in the very structure of creation. The sacred number 7, more than days on a calendar. 7 has always been the divine signature. In the ancient world, it was not simply a number, but a declaration of sacred completion. When Moses recorded that God created in 7 days, the people of Israel would have immediately recognized the pattern. It matched the 7-day consecration of the tabernacle in Exodus, the 7-day dedication of Solomon's temple, and even the 7-fold rituals found among their neighbors in Mesopotamia and Canaan. The Gudea cylinder tells of a temple built in 7 stages, dedicated over 7 days, each step marking the progression toward divine indwelling. In Ugaritic texts, 7 marks the fullness of blessing and the sealing of covenants. Genesis 1 follows this holy rhythm. 6 days of ordering and filling, crowned by the 7th day when God rests, not from exhaustion, but in the sense of a king taking his throne after the palace is ready. The rest of God is the enthronement of God. To reduce these days to mere 24-hour debates is to miss the pulse of the story. The ancients did not hear them as a stopwatch, but as a liturgy, a sequence of sacred acts culminating in the holy presence. When the number 7 appears, it is the sound of heaven's gavel declaring, "It is finished, it is holy." And so the creation week is not about clock time, it is about covenant time, a divine rhythm inviting humanity into the eternal Sabbath. This is why the Sabbath commandment does not stand as a dry legal requirement, but as an open door into communion with the Creator. And within this rhythm, there is more to see. Not only the number of days, but the very way those days mirror one another, revealing the artistry of the one who spoke them into being. The mirrored days, God's poetic architecture. Genesis 1 is no clumsy chronological log. It is a masterpiece of symmetry, a poem where form and meaning are one. The first 3 days are the forming days, light and darkness, sky and waters, land and vegetation. The next 3 days are the filling days, lights in the heavens to govern day and night, creatures of sea and sky, animals of land, and finally, humanity in God's image. Day 1 aligns with Day 4, Day 2 with Day 5, Day 3 with Day 6, form matched with function, space prepared, and then inhabited. This is the architecture of a temple. First you shape the courts, the chambers, the holy place, then you fill them with light, life, and the presence of God. In the Hebrew literary tradition, such parallelism was not an artistic flourish, but a sacred design, teaching that order is the soil where blessing grows. Imagine watching a master craftsman carve the frame of a sanctuary, each stroke deliberate, then bringing in the lampstands, the altar, the bread of the presence, until the moment comes when the divine glory fills the space. That is what Genesis is showing. Humanity's creation on the sixth day is no accident. It is the climax, the placement of the priests in the temple, entrusted with the care of God's dwelling. To read Genesis without seeing this symmetry is to miss the music and hear only the notes. But when we see the pattern, we hear the harmony of heaven, the Creator ordering his house for his own presence, preparing it not as a cold mechanism, but as a living, breathing sanctuary where he and his people will walk together. And this pattern, once seen, draws us into the next revelation, that creation itself is layered with holy space, moving from the outer to the innermost, just as in the temple that Israel knew so well. The three holiest circles, from heaven to humanity. In the camp of ancient Israel, everything revolved around the presence of God, and that presence was arranged in circles of increasing holiness. At the heart stood the Holy of Holies, veiled and radiant, the place where heaven touched earth in purest form. Around it lay the holy place, where priestly hands tended the lamps, offered incense, and set out the bread of the presence. Beyond that, the outer court, where the people gathered, sacrifices were made, and the dust was stirred by the footsteps of worshippers. This was not just architecture, it was a map of the cosmos, a reflection of how creation itself was ordered. In Genesis chapter 1, these same concentric sanctuaries appear in poetic form: the highest heavens and light, the dwelling of God, the skies and seas, teeming with life and glory, the land and its creatures, crowned by humanity. And just as the innermost circle of the temple was the most sacred, so in creation's design, humanity stands nearest to God's heart, bearing his image, entrusted with the role of royal priesthood. This is not a privilege to be hoarded, but a calling to serve, protect, and mediate his presence to the rest of creation. To be at the center is to bear the weight of holy responsibility. The tragedy of forgetting this order is that we begin to see the world as ours to consume instead of God's to inhabit. The beauty of remembering it is that every act of love, justice, and care becomes priestly service, every breath a prayer in the temple of creation. And as history unfolds, we see that this vision was not a modern invention, but a wisdom carried through centuries. Not a new theory, a forgotten ancient wisdom. Long before modern debates twisted Genesis into a battleground between science and faith, the ancients understood it as the story of God's temple. The Book of Jubilees, the writings of Philo and Josephus, rabbinic commentaries, and the meditations of the early church fathers all echoed the same theme: the 7 days as the dedication of God's dwelling place. In Byzantine art, the creation scenes shimmer with temple symbolism: arches like heaven's vault, thrones for the Creator, streams of living water flowing from Eden as from the sanctuary. This vision was once the common inheritance of God's people. But as the centuries passed, the Enlightenment shifted the lens. The world became a machine to be measured, not a sanctuary to be entered. Genesis was dissected with the tools of natural philosophy, stripped of its liturgical soul, and turned into a cold chronology. The result was not deeper understanding, but a diminished one, a flattening of a living, breathing story into mere sequence. Yet the ancient vision still waits, hidden in plain sight for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. To recover it is not to invent something new, but to return to a wisdom older than empire, older than Rome, older than the exile, a wisdom as old as creation itself. And once we see this, it transforms not just our theology but our worship, pulling us away from hollow arguments toward the presence that the story was always meant to reveal. Why this matters: faith beyond science debates. If Genesis 1 to 2 is the dedication of God's cosmic temple, then the endless battles over the earth's age and the mechanics of its origin lose their power to divide us. The focus shifts from proving dates to entering God's presence. Sabbath becomes more than a doctrinal footnote. It becomes the weekly reminder that the King is on his throne and we are his royal priests. Worship changes, not because we've learned new facts, but because we've rediscovered the purpose. In a temple worldview, creation care is not politics, it is liturgy. To pollute the rivers or scar the earth is not merely unwise, it is sacrilege against the dwelling place of the Most High. To welcome the stranger, to heal the broken, to restore justice is to light the lamps in his sanctuary. This is why the ancient vision matters. It rescues us from a small, dry faith trapped in debates and restores the expansive wonder of walking with God in his house. And when we live like that, Sabbath rest becomes resistance to the idols of endless productivity. Creation care becomes an act of worship, and every breath becomes a reminder that the temple is not just around us, it is us. Living as temple people, the call of Genesis today. If the world is God's temple, and we are his priests, then Genesis is not merely a story to study, but an identity to live. To see every sunrise as the lighting of the temple lamps, every stream as a cleansing basin, every act of mercy as incense rising before his throne, that is to live as temple people. This means resisting the violence, greed, and exploitation that defile the sanctuary. It means cultivating beauty, justice, and compassion in the spaces we inhabit. Imagine a church that sees its mission not just as saving souls, but as tending the garden temple of creation, repairing what sin has marred, carrying the fragrance of God's presence into the streets, the workplaces, the homes. This is not sentimental poetry. It is the practical outworking of a cosmic calling. To live as temple people is to remember that our lives are not our own. We have been set apart for the service of the King. And as we take up that calling, we join the story that began in the beginning of God creating, a story that moves toward the day when the whole earth will be filled with his glory, as the waters cover the sea. From here, the narrative does not end. It leads us back, past the gates of Eden, into the very presence from which all life flows. And so, as the echoes of Genesis whisper through time, you and I stand again at the threshold of the garden. Not the distant myth we were told as children, but the living reality of God's dwelling here and now. This world, this breath, this heartbeat, these are not accidents. They are sacred spaces, woven into the fabric of the cosmic temple by the hands of the one who spoke light into being. Every sunrise is the curtain drawn back on holy ground. Every night sky is the vaulted ceiling of his sanctuary. You are not merely an inhabitant of this world. You are a priest in the house of the Almighty, called to tend the flame, keep the sanctuary pure, and carry his presence into every corner of creation. The truth we've uncovered today is more than an interpretation. It's a restoration. For too long, the story of Genesis has been flattened into a timeline, stripped of its heartbeat, reduced to debates over hours and ages. But the ancients knew something we have forgotten, that the first chapter of Scripture is not the cold report of a clock's first tick, but the warm unveiling of a king taking his throne in his temple. The heavens and the earth are not impersonal objects to be studied from a distance. They are holy courts meant to be walked in awe. The Sabbath is not a lifeless commandment. It is an invitation to step into his rest. to breathe in the atmosphere of eternity, to live as though the garden never closed. And what does that mean for you, here, now, in the middle of your own story? It means your life is not small. Your work, your relationships, your daily choices, they all have temple weight. When you speak truth, you are hanging a lamp in his sanctuary. When you forgive, you are cleansing the altar. When you protect the weak, you are standing in the holy place, offering incense of mercy to the King. Even in seasons where the world feels dark, where chaos seems to be winning, remember, the temple has already been built and the King is still on his throne. You walk not in aimless shadows, but in the light of a story that began before time and will outlast the stars. Let this vision heal something in you today. Let it lift the weight of fear, the heaviness of meaninglessness, the restless ache of wondering if you matter. You are not adrift in an empty universe. You are moving through sacred space. The same God who rested in the garden still walks among the trees, still calls your name in the cool of the day, still longs for you to know that you belong here, with him in the center of his dwelling. And when you begin to live like that, when you wake each morning knowing you are stepping onto holy ground, everything changes. Your pace slows. Your eyes open. Your heart begins to burn again with the steady flame of purpose. I invite you to carry this with you, to let it reshape not just your theology, but your rhythms, your relationships, your dreams. What would your life look like if you saw every conversation as part of the temple liturgy, every act of kindness as a thread in the tapestry of God's dwelling, every breath as a note in the song of creation? How would you treat the world if you truly believed it was God's house? How would you treat yourself if you knew you were his chosen priest, set apart for such a time as this? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what this awakens in your spirit, because your voice matters in this story. If this journey has brought light into your dark places, if it has given you a new way to see the beginning and a deeper way to live the present, I ask you to help me keep telling these stories. If you feel this message has been a gift to your soul or a compass pointing you back to the heart of God, then I invite you. Offer a little of your own light so that together we can keep the flame burning. Your encouragement, your presence here, your unseen acts of support, these are priceless to me. Every word I speak here is fueled by that shared fire, and every seed of truth we plant together will grow into something eternal. Like, subscribe, and share this message if it has touched you, because somewhere out there is someone still reading Genesis through modern eyes, still missing the temple standing right in front of them. Let's place this truth into their hands. Let's build together a community that sees the world as holy ground, that refuses to reduce God's story to a diagram, that walks daily in awe and service. The story does not end here. There is more to uncover, more to restore, more to live. The garden's gates are not locked. The path is open, the light is warm, the King is waiting. Step in. The temple doors are wide, and the presence of God is nearer than your next breath. And as long as we walk together in this story, the song of creation will never go silent.